Chosen one, you didn't land on this message by coincidence. You were led here, handpicked by divine timing, because heaven has something to say to you. And if your heart is already stirring, if something deep inside is rising up as you read this, it's because your spirit recognizes truth when it hears it. You've been walking through battles no one saw, holding your peace while being pulled in every direction, fighting not just for a breakthrough, but for your very identity. And while others look strong on the outside, you were becoming unshakable on the inside. This message is your confirmation that none of it was wasted. Not the tears, not the silence, not the lonely yes when you wanted to give up. You've been tested, stretched, and stripped, but you didn't fold. You didn't sell out. You didn't take the easy way out. And now, something sacred is shifting in your favor. You're not just a survivor. You're a warrior with receipts. You passed tests that would have crushed most people, and you did it with honor. So buckle up, chosen one. What's coming next is bigger than anything you've lost. And if you're reading this right now, it means God trusts you with the weight of what's next. You are not average. You are not forgotten. You are chosen. And this is your moment. Let's go deeper, because what's ahead isn't just a reward, it's a revelation. Looking for purpose and peace? Hit subscribe and start the journey. The turmoil wasn't about performance metrics or public perception. It was a soul-deep calibration. While the surface of life looked mundane or even senseless, the real currents ran beneath, where invisible hands sculpted the unseen core. It was not a matter of credentials or recognition, but of hidden endurance, quiet discipline, and unseen integrity. The struggle wore everyday clothing, postponements, confusion, unmet expectations, and it pressed hardest in moments where no spotlight shone, where applause was absent, and explanations were futile. This was not something preparation could blueprint or logic could navigate. It required surrender when the map disappeared, courage without an audience, and steadiness without reward. What counted wasn't noise but depth, whether stillness could speak louder than declarations, whether the heart could whisper yes while circumstances shouted no. Faith wasn't tested in peaks, but in plateaus, where nothing moved, and still you chose to remain anchored. The real triumph was the unseen decisions, when the opportunity to retaliate was passed by, when integrity was chosen over gain, when kindness remained in the face of rejection. Every time the silent road was taken instead of the obvious one, a mark was etched, though invisible to others, deeply recorded where it counted most. It wasn't for spectacle. It was for refinement. The pain didn't ask for permission, and the process gave no guarantees. But through it all, the spirit was sculpted into something unshakable. No reward was being purchased. Rather, recognition was being unveiled. What lies ahead is not a prize, but proof. Proof that in the void, strength was built, and in the silence, truth was chosen. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. This next unfolding is not compensation. It is confirmation. The resilience forged in secrecy now finds its echo in what is to come. Not because shortcuts were taken, but because something sacred was preserved. Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Matthew 7 verses 13 to 14 NIV. That verse right there, that's your confirmation. That's your story. Because let's be real, the broad road had lights, signs, and shortcuts. It looked good, it felt easy, and everybody else was on it. But you didn't follow the crowd. You chose the narrow gate. You chose the path that didn't always make sense to your flesh, but your spirit knew. This is where life is. See, God doesn't test us in the obvious places. He doesn't hand out blessings where it costs nothing. No, he hides the true reward in places where obedience isn't glamorous, where the applause is absent and the crowd has moved on. He watches who'll still walk straight when the crooked path is paved in gold. And you did. You passed by the fast track, not because it didn't tempt you, but because something deeper was guiding you, something eternal. You had the chance to blend in, to follow trends, to fake it just enough to get noticed. But you didn't. You didn't perform for attention. You chose truth over traction. And let me tell you, heaven took notes. Let me put it like this. Imagine a house built on sand. It looks good on the outside, but the first storm takes it out. Now think of one built on rock. Takes longer, costs more, less flashy, but it stands through every season. That's your life. You're not just standing, you're planted, rooted, anchored, and when the winds of life blew, you didn't sway. That's not luck. That's legacy, that if your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. The enemy offered you comfort, but you chose character. He dangled shortcuts, and you answered with stillness. When others molded themselves to fit in, you decided your spirit wasn't for sale. Let me tell you something, family. That's rare. That's holy. That's why favor's about to hit your life in ways that don't make natural sense, because your heart passed tests that weren't seen, but they were sacred. Some folks chase influence. They chase numbers, status, open doors. But you chased obedience. You chose purity even when it meant fewer followers. You chose peace over platform. You chose to wait when your heart said go, because your soul said not yet. That, right there, is spiritual maturity. Let me break it down even simpler. Integrity will always cost more up front, but it pays more in the long run. You didn't cash out early. You stayed in the fire. You let God refine you when you could have escaped. And now, you're not just ready, you're proven. When you said no to what glittered but didn't carry glory, you positioned yourself for something divine. You said no to temporary, so you could hold the eternal. You turned down noise, so you could walk in anointing. That's why you're about to walk through doors nobody can shut, because you didn't pry them open. You waited. You trusted. You obeyed. Don't you dare think the quiet season was wasted. Don't you let the enemy lie to you and say nothing's coming. What's ahead isn't just breakthrough, it's vindication. God's about to put evidence around your name. He's about to decorate your faithfulness in ways you didn't expect. Not because you were perfect, but because you were faithful. And that's what heaven honors. So keep your shoulders back and your eyes up, because the road you chose, the one with less noise, less applause, more tears, it's leading you into rooms your integrity built. And when you get there, you won't have to explain a thing. Your fruit will speak. Stay in alignment. Stay available. Stay true. What's coming next isn't just for you, it's through you. Your story is about to be a sermon. Your restraint is about to release reward. And it's all because you said yes to the narrow road. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. The refusal to bend was not stubbornness. It was sacred discernment. There were conversations left unspoken, promotions left untouched, networks left unexplored. Not because they weren't appealing, but because they lacked integrity's fragrance. Many sprinted toward acclaim, while the steps here were deliberate, waiting not for convenience, but for confirmation. Others wondered why certain things were declined, not realizing the quiet standard being protected. There were losses, but each one became a line in heaven's journal. The missed chances on paper were counted as triumphs in the unseen. When others prioritized what shined, the gaze here stayed fixed on what endured. When some asked, "How fast can I arrive?" the real question became, "Will I arrive whole?" Nothing was taken for the sake of appearing successful. No spotlight was allowed to replace the inner voice. The choices weren't just disciplined, they were deeply spiritual. They spoke of a heart unwilling to dilute what was sacred for what was trendy. This wasn't about rejecting the world. It was about refusing to lose oneself in the process of reaching for it. And now comes the reversal. Not because of striving, but because of standing. Every silent no is turning into a visible yes. Every lonely decision is becoming a public display of honor. What was sacrificed behind closed doors will be vindicated before open ones. The echo of obedience is finally returning as elevation not rooted in spectacle, but in substance. It wasn't resistance born of ease. It was forged in fire, in the precise moments when comfort called loudest and fatigue whispered surrender. The opposition didn't barge in with noise alone. It arrived subtly, bearing polished masks, familiar rhythms, and just enough charm to seem harmless. It came where desire met emptiness, where old wounds still throbbed beneath the surface. Every scheme was calculated, not chaotic, tailored to disarm, not destroy at once, but to gradually pull the soul off course. Disguised offers looked promising, almost perfect. They mimicked past prayers and echoed former dreams, hoping to slip through unchecked. Invitations came with smiles, with warmth, with language that soothed, but something underneath felt off. It wasn't the absence of need that made you pause. It was the presence of discernment. That inner compass, calibrated through pain and patience, caught what the eyes alone could not. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. There were moments of deep wrestling. The crossroads came, cloaked in relief. But your choice wasn't made in impulse. It was made in alignment. You didn't react. You reflected. You remembered not only where you came from, but what it cost to escape it. The invitation was tempting, not because it was dark, but because it was familiar. Still, you walked away, not because you didn't feel, but because you finally healed. That unseen decision echoed across dimensions. It wasn't a minor choice. It was a turning point. A call ignored, a message deleted, a conversation left unanswered. Each one a dagger through the cycle that once held you captive. What looked like restraint was actually warfare. What appeared like hesitation was deep, holy resistance. Nothing flashy marked that moment, but everything shifted. What tried to entangle your future lost its grip. What tried to blur your clarity was exposed by your stillness. The very trap that was meant to delay you became a testimony to your maturity. This wasn't about moral perfection. It was about the courage to choose differently than before, even when it would have been easier to return. That single rejection of the wrong thing preserved space for the right thing to find you. The ripple was greater than you could see. Timelines redirected, unseen permissions revoked, spiritual weight lifted. The cost of that no, though silent, was loud in the heavenlies. And that quiet choice, invisible to those around you, carried the power to secure breakthroughs generations deep. Honor now flows not from public applause, but from spiritual authority. The very restraint that went unnoticed will soon be recognized as the reason doors open without effort. Not because you earned it through force, but because you were entrusted with it through integrity. This is the fruit of a private battle won, without witnesses. This is the reward of walking away clean. Some of the most defining victories are the ones no one else knows about. The kind that happened in solitude, far from applause or accountability. In the quiet corners where shortcuts appeared justifiable, where no one would have questioned a small step around the process, something inside refused to be diluted. There was no validation waiting, no spotlight, just a silent decision that carried the weight of eternity. It would have been easy to tweak the truth, embellish the progress, hide the unfinished beneath polished layers. The world might have clapped, the crowd might have cheered, but none of that mattered as much as the unseen gaze. That awareness, sacred, steady, kept the heart anchored when compromise came wrapped in convenience. There were options, quick routes, quiet cheats, masked motivations that looked like strategy but were rooted in self. Invitations to inflate what hadn't matured, to showcase results that hadn't been earned. And still, those detours were denied. Not because the pressure wasn't real, but because the standard was higher than human approval. What guided the path wasn't a desire to impress. It was the commitment to stay real, even when the pace was frustrating and others seemed to advance faster. It was the willingness to wait for timing that aligned with purpose, not optics. It was about finishing the work, not faking the result. The discipline was unseen, but the devotion was deep. That wasn't just patience. It was consecration. The decision to resist appearance in favor of authenticity. To remain rooted when imitation looked profitable. And yes, there were moments where quitting seemed logical, or pretending seemed harmless. But even then, The decision was made to be consistent when it cost something. No one may have celebrated it in a moment. No hands clapped for honesty. No headlines praised restraint. But a record was kept, one that didn't measure speed, but substance. And from that quiet integrity, a foundation was laid that no counterfeit could replicate. The path was slow, but it was sacred. And now, what grows from that place will stand because it wasn't built on illusion. Not every harvest comes from the visible grind. Some emerge from the hidden loyalty to do it right, even when no one's watching. That's what shifted everything. Not the public decisions, but the private ones. Now, what's unfolding is a result of trust tested in silence. There was no manipulation, no masked ambition, just truth, kept alive in obscurity. That's why the next elevation will be unmistakable. Not questioned, not forced, not explained. Because it wasn't chased, it was entrusted. And it all began the moment the easy road was declined, and the honest one was chosen instead. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. There's a rare kind of strength that's not born from triumph, but from restraint. Restraint that held firm while life tightened its grip and clarity slipped through your hands. This wasn't just about staying alive through the pressure. It was about preserving something sacred while the pressure surrounded you. Not everyone makes it through with their integrity intact, but you did. And that is what changed everything. It wasn't proven when circumstances were favorable or when things unfolded with ease. It was revealed in the silence, when everything stalled and you were left face to face with your limits. You didn't unravel. You didn't switch codes when things got tight. You didn't retaliate when you had every reason to strike back. You didn't abandon your values just to feel momentary relief. When things turned cold, your spirit stayed warm. When temptation mocked your pain, you didn't bite. You didn't conform just to be accepted. You didn't stoop when others swung low. You kept your tone clean when the atmosphere got toxic. You chose dignity while surrounded by disappointment. That's the kind of posture no spotlight can manufacture. It has to be grown in darkness. That season refined you. It stripped away what was shaky. It carved character into your very frame. And while others may have assumed you were breaking, you were actually being upgraded. Your name became a signal in the unseen realm. You're not just noticed, you're trusted. Not because you reached high, but because you stood firm. Not because you looked strong, but because you lived true. And now things are shifting. Not because you demanded it, but because your consistency summoned it. When others manipulated visibility, you were becoming undeniable in secret. What held you down is now bowing to what's within you. The inner choice to stay rooted under fire has activated permission from realms you haven't yet stepped into. The reward isn't random. It's a response. There's a kind of authority that only arrives when character collides with pressure and refuses to surrender. That is what now opens doors without effort, clears paths without explanation, and places you where no shortcut could have taken you. The weight you carried in silence is being exchanged for recognition you didn't chase. What was once your private discipline is becoming your public distinction. The honor you guarded when no one clapped is now drawing applause without noise. This wasn't about just getting by. It was about getting built. And now the building is finished. Now the seal is visible. The recognition coming is not about popularity. It's about proof. Proof that reverence under strain is more powerful than resistance alone. You honored your assignment, even when it pressed hard against your humanity. And now, the response from the unseen is undeniable. The elevation wasn't earned through speed. It was unlocked through honor. Few will ever grasp the weight of what you endured when no one was looking. It wasn't the resistance in public that shaped you. It was the trial and solitude that redefined your core. This wasn't a battle for recognition or applause. It was a refining hidden from every eye but one. You weren't overlooked. You were being overhauled in silence. The setbacks weren't punishment. They were positioning. The retreat wasn't a rejection. It was a recalibration. The moments you spent in silence, far from affirmation, were the very moments you were being equipped for influence. There were no headlines marking your fight. No encouragement flooding your messages. Just echoes and questions that left you with yourself and the one who never stopped watching. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. The disconnection wasn't random. It served a deeper purpose. The phone going silent, the rooms growing cold, the absence of those you once carried. Each served to deepen your clarity and detach your identity from fleeting voices. You weren't abandoned. You were invited into a space where noise could no longer compete with truth. In that stillness, everything you once leaned on was removed, not to break you, but to awaken something indestructible. The unfamiliar quiet didn't mean you were forgotten. It meant you were being focused. And even when no answers came, even when nothing around you changed, you still stayed aligned. You still spoke light. You still gave effort, even when it felt invisible. That season wasn't empty. It was exacting. The solitude pruned what no crowd ever could. It made room for discernment to mature and allowed character to outgrow performance. That was not stagnation. That was sacred construction. You were not sidelined. You were being fortified for something that required endurance few would be willing to cultivate. You didn't retaliate. You didn't campaign for sympathy. You didn't chase what left or try to revive what expired. You waited, not because it was easy, but because your foundation wasn't built on attention. It was built on allegiance. And now, what was born in private obedience is rising as undeniable evidence. The same silence that once stung now stands as the proof of your preparation. You became resilient where no one applauded, consistent when no one acknowledged it, and anchored when others drifted. The upcoming shift isn't repayment, it's recognition. Not for what the world witnessed, but for what you surrendered when no one saw. The hours you gave to things that looked fruitless were never wasted. They were recorded. They were planting what now begins to bloom beyond reason. Don't diminish that hidden chapter. That chapter was the birthplace of your depth. That's where the weight you now carry was formed. That's where you passed through fire without an audience, and where your elevation quietly began. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. Every breakthrough has a beginning hidden in obscurity, and yours was forged in rooms no one entered with you. The shift that's approaching is not some random stroke of fortune. It's the unveiling of what was shaped in unseen moments. What's coming now is not based on the opinions of others, but on the consistency you maintained when no one was clapping and nothing was changing. This next stretch of your journey will not emerge because of charisma, but because of character. What's about to rise was assigned long before the struggle ever started. What once felt like restriction was actually refinement. The silence was sacred. The waiting was surgical. The pressure, though painful, was the proof that something greater was growing underneath. You were never hidden to be forgotten. You were hidden to be formed. While others misread your pause as failure, heaven marked it as preparation. You didn't collapse when the season stretched too long. You didn't compromise when the answer was delayed. You didn't let rejection mold your identity. You just kept showing up in tears, in tension, in total surrender. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. What's being unlocked now is not a reaction, it's a revelation. Every unnoticed sacrifice, every unseen yes, every moment of trust that cost you your comfort is echoing back now as reward. This isn't about status. This is about stewardship. And because you handled the unseen season with reverence, what comes next will not just bless you, it will position you to uplift others. This shift wasn't earned by manipulation or movement. It was authorized by endurance. You are stepping into spaces that were marked for you before you had the strength to stand in them. Not because you demanded them, but because you were faithful when no one was watching. There's no need to explain the open doors. They're not the product of noise. They're the result of internal calibration. You matured while misunderstood. You kept your rhythm when the melody disappeared. You honored the process while others rushed the result. Now, the same silence that tested you becomes the canvas for your rise. What you built in obscurity will speak louder than any defense. What you cultivated in the background will now carry weight in places your name has already gone ahead of you. This is not the beginning of your making. This is the moment of your manifestation. The shift is visible not because you asked for attention, but because the integrity you carried privately has outgrown its container. This is the season where what you carry cannot stay hidden anymore. Not for applause, not for pride, but because what you steward in secret is ready to bear fruit in full view. It's not just harvest, it's the honoring of every moment you didn't give up, and the story now unfolding will speak for itself.